Hey there, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. And today we're going to be talking about doubling guitars. And no, we're not talking about how to go from owning 2 guitars to owning 4 guitars. That's a whole nother video. What we're talking about is when we're recording our guitar parts in our home studios, how do we get that bigger, larger than life guitar tone? And we're going to talk about the secret to making that as effective as possible. And at the end, I'm going to give you a little bonus tip to make that sound even bigger if that's what you're looking for. So make sure you hit like and subscribe as the intro is rolling, and let's get started. Alright, so if you find this video helpful, make sure you check out the link in the description down below. Grab my free guide there, 7 recording mistakes that ruin mixes. Because we talk about this, we go a little bit deeper into it, and also a bunch of other things to make sure that our recordings and our home studios are sounding amazing before we even get to the mix process. Because if your recording doesn't sound great, your mix is going to suffer as well, because fixing it in the mix isn't really a thing. So make sure you check the link to that out in the description down below, and let's talk about doubling guitars. So what do we mean when we say doubling guitars? Well, at the very basic level, what we're doing is recording a guitar performance of a part on a track. And when we're all done with that, then we make a new track, and then we play that again, perform that part again, and now we have 2 tracks of the performance of essentially the same guitar part. Copying, pasting does not work, but you have to have 2 separate performances of the same part. And then generally speaking, you're going to pan one hard left and one hard right so that they're only each coming out of one speaker. So the first performance coming out of the left speaker, second performance is coming out of the right speaker, or vice versa, whichever you prefer. Okay, so now we kind of know what doubling guitars means. But why does this work? This is really the secret of the whole thing. We're going to dive into this, but this works because of very slight differences. That's really it. So our ears are very sensitive, right? They can hear things behind and front, all these kinds of things. Well, when we got one part playing out of here and one part playing out of here, and they're different performances, no matter how good of a player you are, there's going to be slight differences in timing. So this performance on this one's going to hit this ear first and then this one, just because of the distance difference. So there's going to be slight things going on there. Same thing here, it's going to hit this ear first, then this one. But then because of the sensitivity of our ears, any slight difference in timing, they're going to pick up on that. That's going to make it sound bigger. It's going to hear that as a very similar instrument, but just bigger. Also, slight differences in tuning. Even if you meticulously tune, you're going to push down on a string and maybe a little bit harder at one point, or you're going to accidentally pull just a hair, and they're going to be very slightly tuned differently during the parts. That's going to make it sound bigger. Also, you could have just maybe picked a little closer to the bridge, a little closer to the neck, just depending. For a few notes, whatever, that slight difference in tone is going to be picked up by our very sensitive ears. It's really kind of the same idea as if you were sitting in a theater, and in front of you in the stage, you had a choir of say 30, 40 people in front of you. You had a whole choir, and they're all singing the same note, singing the same note, same part. But you know that because there's people over here and people over here, when they sing, their parts are going to get to your ears at different times just because of different distances. Also, some are going to be a little sharper than others, some are going to be a little flatter than others, all that kind of stuff. And also, their timing's going to be a little different. If they're singing something rhythmic, their timing's going to be slightly different no matter how much they practice. But that's part of what makes a choir sound big compared to just one person standing right in front of you and singing on their own. So let's dive into some examples of how to really maximize this idea, this secret of slight differences. I have a little song I did, just a quick verse and chorus on guitar. Nothing fancy. The first version we're going to listen to is just a single guitar part, and it's just with my Les Paul running to my Rectiverb 25 back here, cab sim on my computer recording software, and let's check out and see what that sounds like. right, so doesn't sound terrible, sounds fine, but it doesn't sound big or larger than life, and that's really the sound we're going for. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with just the basic definition of double tracking. I'm just going to play that exactly the same way, same gear, same everything. Just play it again, pan one hard left and one hard right, and let's hear what that sounds like. All right, cool. Definitely sounding bigger, right? Sounding bigger and fuller, and it's definitely a great step in the right direction. We got some of those subtle differences going on. I haven't edited this or anything, didn't do any post-processing. This is just straight guitars. And so what if we wanted to push those differences slightly further, right? We don't want to take it so far that, like, you know, if we got a banjo playing a part here and a fiddle playing the same part here, that's going to sound like two different instruments playing the same part, which can sound cool, but it's going to sound like two different instruments. We want it to sound like still guitar, the same guitar, just bigger. So what we're going to do now is push those differences slightly further. I'm going to use the same initial Gibson Les Paul track that we had, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the exact same part with a different guitar. I have my Ibanez Talman, and instead of humbuckers like the Les Paul has, it has P90 style humbuckers, which are going to have a bit of a different tone, a bit of a different sound to them from the humbuckers. But I'm using the same amp, same settings otherwise. Everything else is the same, just a different guitar with slightly different pickups. All right, so that was cool, right? Now we got definitely a bigger sound going on. It's just kind of full. There's definitely a little more difference between the left and right, and so it's starting to sound more full. Another thing we could have done to change things up a little bit without going crazy far is, instead of choosing a different guitar to play, we could have chosen a different amp to play. So this version is going to both be played with the Les Paul. We got that same original Les Paul track we've been going with this whole time. I'm going to play it again, except this time I'm going to use an amp sim of a JC M800. It's the ML800 from ML Sound Lab. It's a great amp sim. I like to pair it with this Rectiverb a lot because when you do the different amp thing, a lot of times you want to have complementing amps. So the Mesa thing is generally going to be more scooped. The Marshall thing has a little bit more mids, so they kind of complement each other and kind of fill the voids and gaps of each other. So you can always find online, there's lots of things on there about what kind of amps complement each other well, depending on genres and stuff like that. But this is what we're going on with this. The Mesa and the Marshall, same guitar, just pan hard left and hard right. So that's another great option, especially if you don't have multiple guitars and multiple amps and all that kind of stuff. You can use an amp sim. I do it all the time, and it just kind of fills things out and gives you that other option for those slight differences being pushed a little further and sounding bigger. And of course, the natural progression from here is we could do guitar 1 into amp 1 and guitar 2 into amp 2, right? So this version right here is going to be the Les Paul into the Mesa, which we've been using this whole time. And then also I'm going to play it again and have the Ibanez Talman. This time I'm playing into that Marshall amp sim. And so now we have even pushed that differences a little further with different guitars and different amps playing the same part. So let's check that out. right, so cool. That's about as far as I personally typically like to push things. I find that if you start pushing things too much further, it starts sounding like two different parts instead of like one sound. It starts sounding like two sounds, kind of like I talked about the banjo and the fiddle earlier. So before I give you the bonus idea for making it sound even bigger, let's talk about some ideas. Say you don't have multiple guitars, or you don't have multiple amps and all that kind of stuff. What are some other options you can do? Well, of course, like I mentioned earlier, you could use amp sims. I only have one amp, but you can use, and I supplement with amp sims all the time. There's lots of really good ones now these days, so I don't find any problem with doing that, and it gives me a tone palette to work with without spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's a great option. Another option you could do is just use different overdrive pedals or something like that instead of different amps. You could always use just a clean channel and use overdrive pedal 1 and overdrive pedal 2, and that can give you some different sounds there as well. Of course, you could always just EQ your amp differently. That's an option as well. Maybe do some drastic EQ moves on one side just to kind of give it a different flavor. You could try playing one part on the bridge pickup and one part on the neck pickup, that kind of thing. That's always an option as well. Just lots of different things like that you can do to really just push those slight differences and play around with that and see what sounds good to you and what gives you the effect that you're looking for. All right, for a bonus example, I'm going to play the exact same chords, but I'm gonna play them up higher on the neck, and they're gonna be longer, just kind of arpeggiated notes. And the exact same chords. The reason this works, again, is because now we have a little bit more difference because we have the pitch difference, obviously, but I'm playing a different rhythm. I'm playing longer notes instead of just like palm mute stuff and, you know, full chord kind of things. All those kinds of things are going to come into play, and I bury them in the mix a little bit just so they're not so prominent. You'll hear this a lot in hard rock and metal and some punk stuff. Sometimes I'll even take an organ sound or a synth sound or strings instead of a guitar and use that and just play long notes underneath the guitar parts, and it just makes it sound so much fuller and massive. It's a very common thing, but if you listen to a lot of stuff that has really big guitars, listen for like a synth or an organ sound, and you're going to hear it a lot. So I'm kind of doing the same thing here, but just with guitar. So let's check that out. So that covers basically our few examples here. Again, there's a lot of ways to do that, so feel free to experiment, try things with the gear you have. If you have any questions or comments or just want to let us know how you like to get big guitar tones, drop those in the comments down below. Happy to answer questions and love hearing how other people like to achieve similar things. And again, make sure you check out that link in the description down below, the 7 recording mistakes that ruin mixes. It's going to be this and a bunch more stuff that's going to help you get more professional sounding, better quality recordings so that your mixes later sound amazing, and it's easier to mix because everything already sounds amazing. And with all that, I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.